Welcome everybody. Thank you, Ruby, for hosting this stage so graciously. As always, it's beautiful to see it evolve. And thanks for being here, everyone. Ruby actually asked me to host this panel and thought it would be a great idea. And there was a moment of me being like, can I actually host something at Medicine? Do I have capacity to do anything but be in like logistics operations mode? And here I am. So thank you. I'm grateful. And it felt really exciting, actually, in many ways. I think the space of men's work is in a really interesting place. Men coming together to share, to heal, to grow is accelerating at a really fast pace. And I think for me, hosting a panel like this is particularly exciting because the space is so supportive of one another. So many men in this space make so much space for other men doing their work. It's one of the only spaces I've ever been in where there's no competitive individualism. There's no yearning to supersede another and to prioritize oneself. And in this space, like all these brothers have been so supportive of one another in different ways. And having an opportunity to sit here on a stage with them and to explore and to express, to inquire what men's work is and why we need it and how it can be a medicine for us in society at this time is an incredible opportunity. And so I am really excited to be here. Ruby's already introduced everyone. So I think what I'm going to do is perhaps give you guys a moment to just introduce yourself and the organization you come from. But I'd also love to understand, what is men's work to you? What called you to this space? Why are you dedicating and committing your life to supporting men in this way? So it'd be wonderful to perhaps begin with Lawrence, and we'll work our way down the row.
So yeah, my name is Lawrence Joye. Most of the men's work that I'm part of at the moment is through Menspedition, and Zak Avery being the sort of other core lead facilitator and host of our retreats. Menspedition, play on words. But the essence of it is that we come together for a few days in community, do some work, do some men's work. You know, that's kind of what we're here to speak out. It's men's work. What is that? I'm sure we'll get into that further, but we love to blend the social and kind of really invite the power of the spaces in between the process work. You know, so we go up a mountain and we share meals together and we form community. And so that's the flavour of men's work that I feel called to, and I feel like it's just naturally starting to want to happen through myself and through Zak and our Menspedition offerings. I'm also co-founder of Kingly Stag, which is a contemporary rites of passage offering. Our kind of initial project, if you will, is to offer ceremonial stag do's. So to offer an alternative to the narrative of you know, going out and it being more about the shaming and the humiliation and perhaps even just kind of a night that no one actually wants to remember, to shifting to something that's about you know, about honouring and about support and about creating a network of brothers who are really going to see this man into this next phase of his life in a supportive way. So yeah, that's a couple of the main parts of my work in men's work at the moment. And the second part of the question was around
why men's work? What is men's work to you? Yeah, what called you to this space?
Right. Yeah. A lot of the time when I speak about what I'm up to in this realm, especially, I just get the reflection, that's so needed, and maybe there's just a deep sense in myself of realizing and recognizing that, and it's very informed by my own journey, my own connection with men in my life, with role models of men in my life. And also there's just the personal experience of the healing that occurred for me. I'm an initiate of the Mankind Project, which is a very well-established organisation. They've been around for a long time, and through the generations, the way that they support men in their work is evolving, and it's nice to be part of that evolution as well. Nice to have gone through that, but also feel able to bring my own flavour and weave in some of my own truth, my own perspective into how that can continue to evolve. And so having been through my own journey with men's work and my own sense of, I guess, just discovering and accepting that my expression of being a man is unique and authentic and it's permitted. And so there was a real medicine in really, really feeling that and really recognizing and letting that in for myself. And just for what it's opened up in myself, it felt really powerful to be turning around and saying, hey, there's a thing you can do and it feels pretty good. My brother, would you be interested? And yeah, not about having any answers, but just holding space for that development in us as individuals, and then how it ripples out through collectives as well. So yeah, that's probably a bit about why. I think I'll pass on there. Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here. Mm.
Hey guys. So my name is Alexander Cottle, and why am I here? I'm here because of a wound. A wound. I wanted to be a man in the world. I wanted to be a man proving myself, showing my father who I am, ticking all of the boxes, the monetary boxes, the chasing women boxes, the can I get a house box, and step up and be a good man. But I didn't really know what a good man was. And in that journey that took me down a big spiral of pain and suffering, I ended up having a stroke at 27, chasing something that just wasn't me. And thankfully that's a TIA, so I wasn't paralyzed. I was only paralyzed for a few hours. But I was deeply, deeply unhappy, and depression and attempted suicide led me to a space where 9 years later, there's no question in me that I want to work with men. Because I've been there, which I think all of these men sat up here will qualify ourselves in that capacity in some way because of our wound. The wound is where the light enters, as Rumi says, and yeah, it's just been an incredibly powerful journey. I founded the Unmasked Man 5 years ago, but you know, these men should be sat up here as well. Mitchell, Campbell Thomas, Kieran Pollett, Josh Lipschitz. And we just want men to relax and soften into their heart, to allow the armor to fall away, to not be a warrior. I was a warrior for too long, and it caused me so much internal pain. So we take men through archetypal journeys. We've updated what we feel was a revolutionary time period in the 1990s, the mytho-poetic men's movement. But masculinity evolves, and we're here now to evolve with it and bring somatic practices and breath work and ice baths and all of that stuff and bring it into an archetypal dynamic of king, warrior, lover, and magician. And without the lover, which weaves so much in our work, then the other three archetypes become very mechanical. So we're here to lead men into sovereignty, into stepping outside their people pleaser and their nice guy, and really, really owning their yes and their no, dropping into their heart. And we do that through educational containers, 4-day retreats, facilitation journeys, downloadable courses, online circles, and giving back to men so we can create leaders. Because we really believe that true leaders kind of carve the way and then gracefully, humbly fall back into the distance and allow other men to step forward and kind of sit there like a humble, loving parent, not in an arrogant way, and just go, yeah. And I had a little effect on the world, so that's why we're here. And I'm honored to sit with all of you, man. Bless you.
Mic check. My name's Leyth Hampshire. I'm one of the co-chiefs of Emergent Men, which delivers day experiences across the country to facilitate transformation in the inner world of men. And that's a fucking challenging, difficult thing to even approach and even ask the question, how do we as individuals create a more harmonious world by healing the wounds that may have just been passed on to us by those that came before us? I'll talk more about Emergent Men, but I'm also one of the operational managers of Medicine Festival alongside this beautiful man. And these last 5 days have been some of the biggest baptisms of fire that I've ever experienced in my life. I'm going to be honest. And it's reminded me why I do the work. Multiple times over the last few days, I've nearly been on my knees in tears because of how challenging the creation and curation of the operations of this experience is. And there's been moments where I've had to ask myself, why do I do this work? It's because we as men in these spaces can do, quote unquote, this work, but the real work happens when we leave. The real work happens when we leave the workshop, the ceremonial space. When you're in true crisis. And men's work for me has been an ongoing journey, which was triggered and the seeds were planted 3 years ago at this festival, Medicine Festival, when I, for the first time in my entire adult life, witnessed men being emotional and compassionate and open and loving at Medicine Festival 3 years ago. And then I sat down with my brother here, George Sargent Childs, and we started to ask ourselves the question, how do we create something that is accessible and open to maybe some men who don't necessarily align with, quote unquote, the woo-woo that can be associated with a lot of these spiritual spaces? So we really focus on understanding how we bring through relational, confrontational, and connection work and build communities in cities. Over the last 2 years, nearly 1,000 men have worked with us in 4 cities across this country. And we're all about understanding how do we build more communities within cities where men feel isolated. Raise your hands if you're a man that's ever felt lonely or isolated. Just take a moment to look around. Thank you. So in 2019, I received a phone call that my stepfather was found dead. And he'd suffered with alcoholism and depression. And that for me became a question I had to answer. What triggers that? Why do we as individuals become addicted? Gabor Mate talks about the hungry ghosts within us. And for me, the basis of the work that I'm doing is answering some of those psychotherapeutic questions of how do we approach men's work in a way that is accessible and open to men across the country at all ages so that we can create a better future and world together, circle by circle, day by day. And my final piece on this is something that we've all shared, is I have a big belief that there is more brothers than brands that need this work. Full fucking stop. There is more brothers than brands that need this work. So how do we as individuals support each other to create as much impact as possible, collectively? Thank you.
Aloha, Bukaye, Peter checking in by way of Bethnal Green, East London. So Peter is my name, Peter Eugene Bennet. I was named Peter because of my father's 3 best friends growing up. So in some ways, I was already in a men's circle before I came back onto this planet. And as a result of my relationship with my father, it drew me into this work. My father's a beautiful man, Malcolm Burton Bennet, of Celtic and Gaelic and actually Scandinavian ancestry. And as a result of being the youngest child, actually I've got an older sister. When I was born, my dad said he wanted another girl, and I think that original wound has somehow led me to where I am today. I wouldn't say unfortunately, but my father was quite heavy-handed. I grew up with a bit of corporal punishment in the household and getting shouted at, a lot of rage. And as a child, I definitely carried a bit of a chip, not so much on my shoulder, but a knot in my tummy. And I've realised in recent years how I've been carrying this wound of not being seen, not being heard, feeling dismissed. And as a result, I've actually grown to understand my father and the wounds that his father and his father's passed on to him. So this ancestral trauma is something that we work with at Sacred Sons, an international brotherhood that I was fortunate to have gone and been initiated with them last March in 2023 in the States. We've got thousands of men who've been through the trainings. What we call it is masculine alchemy, transmuting that stuck energy, the wounds, the trauma, the insecurities, all the stories that we share as a collective, however through the lens of the masculine. And what we call is the pathway to embodiment, back to leadership, back to self-sovereignty, and also stewardship of the lands. So incorporating remembrance of our ancestral traditions and how we connect in reverence and respect, in ceremony and ritual, not just with the land, but with one another. So I've learned along the path to accept those parts of me that were in the shadows, shall we say, connecting with my African heritage as well, learning songs as a result of being with Sacred Sons, also languages, which has been a beautiful transmission between some of the brothers here, connecting with the language of the lands. And ultimately, what I feel like this journey has been, not just for myself, but for the brothers at Sacred Sons and beyond, is the journey from the head to the heart, recognizing that I don't have to be self-analytical, self-abusive, have self-hate in my head. I had so many stories during my dark night at the soul from the age of 16 until I was around 26, Saturn returns, where I just felt like I wasn't enough. And as a result of doing this work, I moved back into the body and felt what these emotions were. I didn't have to numb myself anymore to the parts of myself that were scary, that were tender, tending to my own garden and flourishing in bloom every season, knowing that I'm truly here with my brothers. We stand shoulder to shoulder and we'll continue doing this work for each other and for all the brothers and sisters out there in the world.
Hi everyone, my name is Michael Maisey. I am an author. I'm the founder of the CIP project. I'm a beekeeper. I've been sober nearly 16 years. I'm a father. I've got my beautiful daughter there. I'm a beekeeper as well. I don't know if I've already said that. And I'm an initiated Lakota sun dancer as well. Yeah, I don't know what to say really. Like, I grew up in a broken home, come from a traveller family. Fighting and drinking was the main culture we had. And then I joined a gang, went to prison at the age of 15 for attempted murder. Spent most of my teenage years locked in a prison cell for 23 hours a day. And on my final time in prison, I tried to take my own life and was found and resuscitated and brought back to life. And that was like my rock bottom. And I left prison and started a journey of trying to improve my life. The real integration of this work started for me in 2007 when I got sober. Attended an organisation called Clear Mind International, and then went on to be initiated by the Mankind Project in 2014, and then set up the CIP project in 2018. Because one of the things I recognised in this work was there were so many people from my community and from my council estate who wanted to access Menswork but couldn't afford to pay the money that organisations were charging. So I set up a charity that makes it affordable and accessible to everyone. And we take this work into prisons and poor schools across the UK. So yeah, that's me, that's what I do. But aside of all of that, like, what Menswork is for me isn't really about what I say. It's not really about anything that any of us say, I don't believe. It's like if you were to give my daughter the microphone now and say, what's daddy like when no one's watching? That's a real test of the man right there. You know, ask my wife, what's Michael like when he's tired and grumpy? You know, like that's a real test. That's the real work. The real work is in your home. So, yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
My name's Tony Riddle. I am a father, husband, human. I'm a father to 4 unschooled kids and 3 daughters that came first and 1 son. I would say the men's work for me was done when my first daughter entered the world, and they enabled me to see who the man I needed to become, really. And with each daughter that came, more and more of the deconstructing, dismantling of the old self, I would say, came through. And I feel that they entered the world or chose me then and enabled me then to become a template for my son to come into the world. I come from a background where most of the male types or templates came from quite hard men. My grandfather was from Newcastle. His dad committed suicide post-war. And from the age of 15, he was brought up by his brother and his brother's partner, who took it upon themselves to kind of abuse him. So he left home, walked south barefoot, and I'm also a barefoot endurance athlete. He was a bare-knuckle fighter and then had 4 sons and 4 daughters. And the 4 sons were then brought up with this quite hard men again. So my templates were always that, and from very early age at school, I become one of those. That was who I had to become in a way, this armour that I'd been wearing, which led me down a path of crime. So prison came. I then joined the army, and joining the army, thought it was a way out, a way of stepping out of those templates of booze and drugs to kind of numb the pain, I guess, of the generations. And it was a pseudo rite of passage, of course. And by the time I'd left, I was then in a position where I was completely lost. So attempted suicide came, more booze, more drugs came. Just not fulfilled in any way or shape or form. Time passed, and I found my physical self, and I found my physical capacity, my capacity to move well. So I honed lots of physical practices, but hadn't worked on my social or spiritual self in a sense. So deeper work came, medicine work came, and a real understanding of finding oneself within that. A real deeper connection to this understanding of, well, the remembering comes through, I think, through medicine work and journeying, that we would have once been men in circles. And I have a project called Man Men, and the logo is a circle, and the men are in the middle and the man is outside, because it can be quite lonely out here being a man, but it's nice to know there's more men in the circle. And someone asked me earlier about Man Men and said, you know, do you find it's difficult for men to show vulnerability? And I said, no, I actually think it's harder for men to find spaces where they do share vulnerability. And it's about space and creating space. That's all it is, you know. And once you set a fire and you have men in a circle, once one starts sharing, they all start sharing. Then you find there's a thread, there's something that brings us all together and something magical happens. But there's also, outside of vulnerability, this other expression that men have to have, right? We are these physical beings and social beings and spiritual beings. It's not just all vulnerability. There's other sharing, right? But it's the space that needs to be created for us to get together that enables us to realise it's not so lonely out here. It doesn't have to be suicide being the number one statistic for death in amongst men under the age of 50. You know, if we create more space, then it's not so lonely. That's my project, and that's what I'm passionate for today, you know. Much love. Thank you for hearing us, by the way.
Thank you so much, men. It's really beautiful to kind of see these common threads between all of our journeys. You know, the wounded then heals the wound and then wants to support other men to do so. It's a very common thread in this work. And I have a similar journey to many of you men in some ways. And it's inspiring, actually, incredibly inspiring to see the way in which all you men step up and step into this world and commence the journey inward to explore our internal architecture as men, to then hold a space to allow others to do the same. And it requires a certain type of human, actually, to hold a space in these ways, to fully witness men. And I think there's a real art in holding a container that allows men to fully relinquish their armor. And I've been in many of your spaces, brothers, and it's an honor to be here with you. And so I'm aware that time moves on quite quick with so many men on a panel, so there's going to be a lot less questions than I had originally anticipated. So we'll try and keep it fairly succinct. I've definitely got 2 more questions I'd love to ask. So please bear that in mind in the next 45 minutes when you're speaking. But I'd love to inquire a bit more around the collective piece. You know, as we expressed, men's work is burgeoning right now. There's many new organizations. There's so many men that are coming and experiencing this work and then taking this home to create spaces within their smaller communities. Perhaps it's within 5 friends, but they're popping up everywhere. And it's really what we need is these localized communities of men stepping into that, you know, expanding their sphere of competence, reaching their edge, and just creating a space for other men, whether it's simply a space to be in circle and to have 5 minutes to talk about your day. And so my question is around, like, why is this space so needed and expansive at the moment? Why do we need to be with other men specifically to do this work? Why is it gender specific? And how does this space specifically inform a more expansive idea of masculinity? You know, how do we allow men to embody this way of being that moves away from the toxicity that we believe society perpetuates men to be, that supports men to be in this kind of capitalist world of competition and egocentric, often, ways of being? How do these spaces allow men to fully relinquish, you know, that part of themselves that's not serving them, that many of us can relate to, and many of us have perhaps had the journey of? So really the question is, like, why men's work? Why just men? And why at this time? And why is it so heightened? And Tony, perhaps we begin with you and go back down the road.
Why now is always a good question, or why not now, I guess. For me, it seems, again, the piece on being lonely was, for me, it was part of it. And the men that we have coming today to the circle, they're unpacking stuff that they haven't unpacked in their own marriages and families. So they've pushed it so deep. And we're talking, these stories can go back to childhood or schooling or whatever it is, but there's the container that's there is enabling them to share stuff that there's perhaps guilt and shame around, that they can't feel that they can express to what might be the divine feminine, right? We are discovering, I think, within those circles that it's just a very safe space that, again, what I expressed to earlier is once one starts sharing, there's suddenly, that relates, that resonates. And then the outpouring can become. And with that, once that lid has been lifted, then it's an opportunity to learn how to express again. So I think it's a time of expression for all right now. We are in a state of being information rich and experience poor, I would say, like data gathering, like I need more and more information. And yet, for my mind, we just need more and more experience. So I guess we're reconnecting with how it is to experience being in the company of men again, to be able to share. And the circle is so important because that guilt and shame isn't just towards the divine feminine, we might be feeling that, but in our own social circles that we've grown up with, the more familiar relationships of family members or old friends. And there, within my old network of friends, there would be a sense of being ridiculed even almost for sharing what might be vulnerability. But when we sit in a circle now, and it can be a group full of complete strangers, suddenly we can find that moment to talk and express. And we remove a lot of the guilt and shame in that sense. Well, it feels that to me. I think I held a workshop recently. It was at a bigger event. It's called the 100 Human Experience, and we had a men's and a women's circle. And it's celebrating the roles in a way that then we come together in celebration, and then there's an interdependence again, but there's a strengthening of ourselves within that, so that when we do come together as the collective, we're then empowered as a whole. So I feel there's an empowerment in the work, in either men's work or women's work, that can come forward. There's an opportunity to share that perhaps we might not feel comfortable sharing in the company of women. Some of the traits perhaps that are unhealthy, and I put down some unhealthy masculine traits on cards and put men in a circle, and they shuffle the cards and they hand a card, and it could be womanizing, could be whatever is on that card, and that person then shares what that is. And again, you'll be amazed. You can have we had like 42 men in a circle, never met before, and they're sharing at such a level, but again on a subject to say womanizing, that they might not be comfortable sharing that with a woman. So that for me feels like that's where it's at. It's finding comfort with sharing with men that perhaps we may not be comfortable sharing with women, or in our old circles of friends where we feel that there'd be ridicule. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really glad that Tony touched on bringing in the feminine, because for me, like, being in this work since 2007, a lot of men's work is about bringing in the feminine, the integration of that. And one of the things we do at the CIP project, we do bring the wives and the children in, because to really understand the importance of men's work, you really need to hear from them. Like, what difference has it made to you as a wife or as a child? And I don't know, with your guys' permission, I'd really like to offer you guys this now, you know, like, and I don't know if my daughter Sienna would be willing to, but we could ask my daughter Sienna, why is it important that dads and men do this work? What's been the benefit for you in your dad doing this work?
Probably because dads normally mean a lot to daughters, and daughters want to know that they're loved, and when they think they're loved, but if they're not loved, it's because something's wrong with the father. And if the father doesn't feel like he's doing enough work for the daughter or the son, he could get, well, I don't know really, but trying to think of what to say. Yeah, it's just about being loved, really.
Give it up to Sienna. So thank you so much.
I was a bit scared then. I'm not going to lie. I was like, what's she going to say? Am I going to get exposed in front of everyone? No, but this is what it's about. You know, like, I grew up in a very masculine world, and you get that in prison, and then, you know, God gave me 3 daughters, and he was like, you need to soften up, mate. And, you know, between my wife and my 3 daughters, it's really softened me up, and I think, you know, men's work is important because we need to protect what's sacred, and what's sacred, the feminine. What else is feminine? Our own mother, Mother Earth. You know, so men's work goes beyond the men. That's it. Uh-huh.
Simply put, I feel like brotherhood is the medicine. And so in terms of what this world is calling for is men to be able to be vulnerable in these safe spaces, to share amongst each other what it is that really is holding them back, what is stopping them from full expression. In our workshop on Saturday with Sacred Sons, 2 main themes came through. One was trust, that many men feel uncomfortable around other men, that they've had some experiences in their lives where they've been rejected or dismissed or even faced aggression. And so in these spaces where we can confront these parts of ourselves, we start to trust not only ourselves but the other brothers in the room to support us, to have our backs. And the other theme was authenticity, and I feel like the more that we can come into good relation with those parts, right, the wounds and the aspects of ourselves that, for example, only people see behind closed doors, daughters, family, lovers, etc., then we can truly be the person we were born to be and express ourselves in full glory. And as a result of being brothers, we can then really receive the sisters, because we love one another as brothers. We recognize how important it is to hold each other up, to be men of integrity, and meet the sisters who've been doing this work for a long, long time and who've been inviting us in for a long, long time. So, yeah, the final piece is that we are all brothers and sisters, and that this cosmic family is why men's work is so important on this new earth.
Really beautifully shared. And when you were saying that, Peter, what came through was the Nessie Gomez bar, you know, we're all related. And that for me is that reminder that when we're doing this work, we're not only doing it for ourselves, but we're doing it for those that came before us as well. And those that will come after us. Mr. Michael Maisey, Sienna, is just really beautiful to witness that. So thank you. And, you know, Avery, you kind of spoke to how, you know, there's many organizations now doing this work across the country. And yeah, I still feel like we're so early in this work still. There's no word of a doubt that there's many organizations, but we are in an echo chamber at times. Or let me speak for myself. I'm in an echo chamber at times where suddenly I know so many men, Chris Geisler, Danny, other men I'm sure in the audience who have their own men's organizations as well. And still, there is so much space for this work across the country and across the world. There's a few of us here who are Mankind Project initiates. And yet, in October last year, myself and Brother Blaise here were part of the first ever Mankind Project for black and brown men only. It took 35 years for an organization to have an experience that was only for black and brown men. And there was still 40 white men on the experience holding the space. And we're here to support each other. And even just looking at the audience, there's a certain demographic that has access to this work. I have no British blood, but I was born on these isles. My relationship with this country has been complicated. This march I went and facilitated an experience in Egypt with Arabic men. And it was one of the most transformational experiences that I've ever had in my life. Because to look around the circle and see brothers that actually looked like me was beyond words. So yes, there is many organizations doing this, and there is still so much more that can be done. Last October, after the Mankind Project, I went to visit my father who doesn't live in this country anymore, and for the first time in my entire life, I feel like I have a father who's present. And I blamed him so much for not being there for me. But it's what he learned. And forgiveness is why we do this. Can we forgive those who have hurt us? Can we forgive those who didn't know any better? Yes, we fucking can. Because opening our hearts up to brothers and sisters and lovers, family, is why we do this. So yes, there is lots being done. And there is generations more work to come. So yeah, thank you.
Why now? Why now? I think if we look back at the last 100 years, men have been conditioned to live in the warrior archetype. And when we were once soldiers having to fight, having to wear armor, and in the archetypal format we'd call that the sadist, the man that despises anything weak outside there or inside himself. In today's society, I think we see it as the workaholic. Well, I've got to prove myself, I've got to do something, I've got to, show everyone. And I think we're living in a world now where that can fall away, and we can really, really start to allow that armor to fall away, because we're never going to access our heart if we've got that armor on. And I think men have lived in that for so bloody long. And it's horrendous to see. We have men arrive at our retreats, coming out of the cars in tears almost, because there's just a space that they can finally share and feel and break. For me, there's been too much warrior. Warrior is something you go to access it. You know where your sword is. You know your strength. You know your power. You've faced your anger. But you don't live there. If you live there, you become a vigilante. The sovereign, for me, understanding all the other archetypes, being in the heart, relaxed masculinity. I have power. Of course I have power. All of you have power. But we don't have to overcompensate, nor do we need to abdicate. We can just be relaxed with our power. And in falling into ourself and our body and our place, we move from mind to heart. And that's why now I think men are able to come to these incredible spaces and experience this work and then meet the feminine. Because we are human beings with masculine and feminine energy moving through us at every single minute, moment of every single day. And I'm here to also find my feminine. My feminine has led me to so much beauty. And I know we're attaching words to these energies, and I'm not massively big on that. It helps to communicate it. But yeah, softening. We led a workshop yesterday, and it was just all soft, loving heart. And the men just you could just see that they hadn't experienced maybe a lot of that in their life. To not compete, to not fight, to not try and become, but to just be content in this moment here. And if we think of the spiritual journey, it's very similar. So it's again an honor to deliver this work and to move from that sadist, to move from that workaholic, to move from that warrior, that soldier, and to move back into, hello mate, to move back into a space, heart, body, presence, now, connection, and to not isolate, not to bury head in sand, but to step into connection. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, there's not much to add. Really, thank you. Yeah, started with the intros and learnt so much along the way about I should have said that, and it's come back the other way, and now I've got nothing left to say. Thanks, Avery. Appreciate you, brother. All good. So, yeah, why now? It kind of comes back to what I was saying before, because there's a need, right? Like there's a response. I feel this is in the same way as all of the beautiful, amazing feminine empowerment and women's work. And again, there's some emergent bits of women's work which is about owning the inner man or the inner masculine as well, and that's really amazing to see. And all of that was a response to a realization of what was missing, and I feel like that's what we're seeing as well with the men's work. Is each of us has our own journey of maybe reconnecting and owning and accepting all of us, all of the parts of ourselves, and we see that in kind of beyond the individual and the collective, and that's what we're doing here. We're just responding to maybe try and restore some form of balance into a world where actually we can all, no matter our identity, no matter our gender, we can all feel safe in each other's company. We can all feel seen. We can all feel permitted to just bring ourselves and yeah, just come back into a healthier state of relating, and how that creates this culture of love and harmony, and it's harmonize. This is the theme for this year's Medicine Festival, and there's something about that. There's that. I also facilitate the work that reconnects, and yesterday actually ran a men's work that reconnects workshop, and it's not exclusively men's work, and yet, yeah, there's something important about gathering as men, as women, and as mixed. I don't think any of them are sufficient by themselves. We need the spaces for both as well, and for all genders, beyond just the kind of men and women as well. And yeah, the connection piece. I kind of looked around and said, how many of you are here because of Men's Petition? And one man put their hand up. I was like, oh, okay, we need to work on our promo. And then I said, okay, so this is called the men's work that reconnects, and how many of you are here because of that? And almost every hand went up. For me, that was information that what we're seeking is connection. And so I feel like, I hear Charles Eisenstein's voice in my mind speaking about the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible, speaking about work that reconnects us to ourselves, to each other, to the living world of which we're part. And I think that's something we all need to do together. And the men stepping into this work is a part of that. It's a part of the whole, which is all of us honouring and uplifting in all of that work of self-acceptance, and then of community perpetuation that can follow. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, men. Beautiful words. And I'd really love to just make a space to hear a bit more about perhaps your personal stories around this space, personal anecdotes around how men's work has led to transformation in your own life. Perhaps some of your experience facilitating men's spaces. Some of the moments that have moved you the most in this work, where appropriate, honouring confidentiality. But I'd love to hear some of the stories that emerge from being in these spaces so regularly. Many of you men have spent tens or hundreds of weekends and days with many thousands of men. And so I'd love to hear that. Maybe it was your space in someone else's container. But what did you take home? What was the nugget that you were missing? What part of yourself did you find in these spaces? Or perhaps what part of other men have you witnessed? Peter, perhaps you'd like to begin in the middle here.
I actually have a funny story. You mentioned Charles Eisenstein, and he came to our Convergence 7 in North Carolina last October, and he put on the boxing gloves as a part of our ritual combat, which is a beautiful way to confront those parts of ourselves that maybe, as children, as teenagers, adolescents, put the fear in us, right? To be met with confrontation, whether that's physical, whether that's emotional. And so he wrote about it. He's spoken on podcasts about his experiences of actually meeting his edge physically and seeing what it is to come into agreement with a brother, to share, say, we're going to go 60%, and really honor that during the 2-minute rounds that we have. And actually, as a result of doing that myself, that's where some of the biggest shifts have happened. We have a brother, a leader, Kale of Hawaiian and Lakota descent, and if many of you have seen our socials, he's a force to be reckoned with. So prayers up for Maui as well today. Just taking a moment for that. Yeah, and he taught me a lesson. He taught me how to how to respond when I'm feeling small, when I feel like I'm in a corner with my back against the wall. And actually, in our ritual combat, where I was ragdolled, I got concussion actually. Mild concussion. It was all punches of love, as we say. I realized, I was like, wow, I love this. I love being met in this way, you know, really to, as we say, man sharpens man, iron sharpens iron. And so as a result, it's really led me on the physical pillar. You know, I feel very much comfortable in the mental space, having done lots of Vipassana meditations, etc. And even with the spiritual, I've worked a lot in various modalities, plant medicines, etc., even Tantra. And with this particular piece around the physical, I'd kind of ignored it. I'd been avoiding it, to be honest. And so when I found myself in the ring with a man who's willing to meet me, actually, and to push me, with consent, I started being like, yeah, I love it. This is a big part of my journey now, getting back into my body and doing exercise, body weight, free weight, all the weights. I stopped waiting, and I'm now here.
I feel really grateful. I think we speak about collaboration, and I'm very fortunate enough actually to have supported Sacred Sons as one of the UK facilitators, and been at your experiences, Michael, where you bring through the men and the women's work, and it's all about the importance of how do we not only serve the organizations that we are building, but also serve the wider community as well. Later this year, working with Menspedition as well. And for me, that's about kind of removing my sense of identity with what I'm building in order to serve the greater community of what we are all doing together. When we speak to, what's been one of my highlights, or I don't know if that's the right word, but most impactful moments in a men's space, I feel like what comes through in this moment is around being at Sacred Sons, actually, when facilitating some work and actually having my 21-year-old younger brother come to his first ever men's experience. And he's my half brother, and he lost his father, who was my stepfather, when he was 15. And we never got to grieve that together. And he put the gloves on, and I saw him step up and actually have older masculine role models in a space, because I was his eldest masculine role model since he was about 14 years old. And that has had its challenges as well, because he is my brother, I'm not his father. So balancing that dynamic as well has been a real journey. But witnessing him step up and be this powerful young man who has grown up to a point where we went and visited my stepfather's grave for the first time since the funeral together, which was one of the most beautiful, cathartic experiences that I've ever had in my life. And being with my younger brother doing this work was beyond incredible. And I've witnessed many father-sons walk into our spaces and us hold the space for sons to share about how they haven't been seen or supported by their father. And witnessing that has been, no words will really actually be able to showcase the profoundness of the beauty that's experienced in those spaces. And so by creating these family constellations through representation of individual family members, and when that is actually someone's family member, it's like, fuck, wow, this is so beautiful and really powerful. And that, for me, I am most inspired when I witness, because it's real. It's like, this is really happening in real time. And my brother's here running a food stand as well, with my mum supporting him. It's in the movement Charlotte. It's called Chef Hampshire. Vegan pasta. Go check him. Very good food. Thank you, Michael. And just to see how connected he is now to my mother, to himself, after experiencing this level of work is incomparable. You realize what's important when you lose those that you love. Some of us are still fortunate to have parents, both parents, maybe one parent. But it is in our deepest pain that we realize how strong we are. And as Robert Bly said, another quote for you all, in a man's wound is where his genius will be. So lean into those wounds, and may we support each other by leaning into that. And if you can love your family members and those around you, let them know, because you don't know when it might be their last time. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. What's been my most influential moment? There isn't one. There's so many. For me, it's bringing the shadow into the light. Shadow being anything that we deem unacceptable in ourselves or by society, anything that we've suppressed or put away. And when we can bring that into a collective healing space, it doesn't really matter whether it's man or woman, but certainly I'm going to speak from the experiences that I've led. When we can bring for men, is my cock big enough? Have you suffered with premature ejaculation? Because I have. Have you hated your body, or have you ever, been abused? That's massive, massive, massive stuff. So I think there's always a thread and there's always a theme. Sexuality is a big one that is still unspoken about, and which we're trying to bring more and more spaces for men. But as Leyth said, the father wound is huge. We'll take so many men through the anger processes, our journeys, and it's like dad, 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 again and again and again. And it's sad because it shows how many men are fatherless in the world. And what does that lead to? That leads to boys initiating boys. And that boy psychology, that boy energy of boys competing. And we always say it, boys compete, men empower. We say that. We do say that. Do we say that?
I don't know, maybe.
Yeah. I know, the bros before brands. We say that as well. Okay. Yeah. Get with the program. Yeah. But for us to move from that boy energy into man energy, into really, really stepping into our heart and mature masculinity. But if we don't have anyone to show us that, then how do we do that? And I would like to think that all of us sat here are doing our best to lead men into those areas. None of us have got it fixed. None of us are like, this is the way a man should be. We've all had our own journeys, but we've looked towards elder knowledge. We've taken that on board. It's helped us step into a healthier, what we perceive a healthier, aspect and embodied masculinity. And now we're just trying to share that. And that's all we can do, and pass that down, because somewhere along the way it got lost. So, for me, seeing all the wounds and loving them unconditionally. Thank you.
Yeah, I really love the way you phrase that, from boy to man, and that's certainly a theme and flavour of my personal kind of journey into realising that there was work to be done. For a long time, even kind of into my early 30s, I guess there was still aspects of me that were very much more in that boy place than the man place. Most notably the way that I related to women, and how I would just be seeking connection from women to ultimately to feel loved by a woman who would perhaps in some way be representing my mother. And that was because I had a bad relationship with my mother, but it just felt like a maturation for me in that path was to see my mother not anymore as my lifeline of nurturing, but actually to bring that into myself. And there was a really sticky phase where it was a letting go of that in my mother, but then not really finding it in myself, and instead externalizing it and projecting it onto other women in a really unfair way, in a way that I wasn't proud of. And it was, the pandemic was such a crazy time of kind of leaning more into what technology could do for us. But for me, the toxic expression in that was just to be kind of speaking to women online, and the added distance in some way helped feed that part of me that just wanted to kind of like dip in and out, and actually what I had totally overlooked and feel for a long time felt a lot of shame about was actually that was a time where people were really, really seeking connection, and I was just bringing it in and then pushing it away whenever I felt like it. And it took a woman to reflect that to me, and it was, I feel like I really, I got dragged through the coals because I was deeply in love with this woman, and she was the one who had the strength to actually turn around and say that what you had been doing, you need to look at that. And it also meant that we were no longer in a relationship, and it tore me apart so much. Really, really did. And then very soon after that, I met my current partner, who's up at the back, well, at the side there, with our 8-month-old Baba. And it wasn't long after we got together that I did the initiation weekend, the Mankind Project initiation weekend, and there was a big part of that process where I just remember, I can't really speak too much about it. There's a lot of secrecy around it, and it's really annoying. But it's also important for the experience. But it's a very, very fully held, curated experience from start to finish. You turn up, don't need to think for yourself. It's all just kind of happening, and you're in it, and that's part of the magic and the alchemy that's there. I just remember lying on the floor in bits, not really knowing who I was anymore, having just done some amazing, beautiful kind of connection to my inner child. And and there was just this like there wasn't a beam of light from heaven, but there might have well as been. For me internally, it was just this moment of rapture, of completely just, I was undone, unraveled, open, and just looking up and realizing at that moment that there was a readiness in myself to parent myself, right? To become a father to myself. And also to become a father, to a baby as well. And it was a profound, distinctive moment, of it wasn't just a choice, a decision. In fact, it didn't feel like that at all. It just felt like a knowing, like a bam, like a light went on. And that invited me into a maturity in lots of different ways, into partnership, into relating to women more broadly than that, having a daughter as well, so that invitation into suffering. Suffering? No, it's not suffering. Softening. And a little window into fatherhood there for any men thinking of brother. Good to see you. But no, so maybe just to wrap up on that point is that was an invitation for me, like the fatherhood piece and becoming a space holder. Parents are so amazing. Or there's this beautiful form of parenting which is about holding space for the tantruming child. You don't go, oh, it's okay, or try and stop it, or do anything else other than just sort of just take that seat and allow that expression and say, well, just you need to get this out of your system, and I'm here for you. Welcome, and just bring it all. Ami, she's only 8 months old now, and sometimes like the Kali energy that comes through, she's it's great. So she's a little teacher and a little medicine woman already. And mum gets a lot of that from her mum too. And so the fatherhood piece is what's really got me on this path in a big way. And there's been some of it here, but really excited for the conversations that I've been having with many men, and asking me, how's fatherhood how's it treating you? And I've got my journey and my experience, and I'm happy to share that. But I feel like that it's time to form a bit of a council of fathers, of experienced fathers with grown-up kids, fathers with brand new kids. They need each other, to lean on, to be like, it's going to be okay, man, you'll be fine. It's just... So I'm welcoming that into the space and really wanting to weave more of that intergenerational work. And that's, it's been inspired by my own journey for sure. Thank you.
So many threads and so much resonates on the boxing piece and the physical self. I've been very much into the physical practices, and I owned a boxing club, and I've trained like the David Hayes, Derek Chisora, Joe Joyce, all the heavyweight guys, and sparred with people like that. And I bring that onto the experiences. And I also have a bit of intel on the people that are coming because I interview them first. And I had one guy who's vertically challenged. He's quite short, right? And there's a guy that's like vertically challenged, really tall, and who's a ex-international rugby player. But I knew already that the guy who's shorter is an identical twin, and he and his brother would fight, and knew how to fight, right? And were prepared to go there. And I knew the big dude who's the ex-international rugby player hadn't fought before, but had been on a pitch. So to everyone who was observing in the circle, they would look and go, oh, yeah, it's like the men would get together almost like, my money's on the big guy. But the smaller guy got in there, and he was there to fight, and the big guy was like, whoa, I haven't had this before. And then after they've all gone through the experience, I then teach them in how to box. So I give them the skills then, and I think that's ultimately what that was about for me. It was, you can go into the fight with no modalities and skills, and where are we? We're a little lost without that. But if you give people the skills and the modalities to be prepared for the world, then it's a much easier space to navigate, which I think is largely the work in the physical, the social, and the spiritual, being given the skills in amongst that to be able to navigate our world. The father wound, I would call that, right? And this relates to the men's work, but being a father to 4 kids, and they're unschooled, 3 girls, 1 boy, when my first daughter came into the world, I have an elder, his name is Yehudi, who I've taken on his own rites of passage as well, even at the age of 72, had a huge rite of passage, massive kind of unpacking, dismantling. Even at 72, this can be happening, you know. But he said, go and do this experience, and it was called a family constellation. He said, don't do it for you, do it for your kids. Because there's ancestral stuff that's playing on back there that we can't touch, you know? And we can be doing all the work now in this space, but there's still stuff back there governing our behaviours today. So I went to this family constellation, I sit in a circle, and if anyone's not familiar, it's a form of psychotherapy, and it came through the Zulus, and it was about asking ancestors for permission. And I went number 5 within this group, so the first person that gets up, I'm pulled in as a representative as her dad immediately. And then every family constellation I've done has been father. I'm always picked as the dad. And then finally I got to see on the 5th person going up being me, the empty chair, I sit next to the woman that's holding the experience. And I'd already said to her, there's so much being unpacked here. I just don't feel like I have so much going on as the rest of the people in this circle. And she tapped me on the knee. She just went, Wissy. And she just said, tell me about your dad. And I just started sobbing, like, immediately. And I said, I love my dad, and I'm sure my dad loves me, but we just don't, it doesn't feel like we have this connection, you know? I've never hugged my dad, and this was a man sitting there at the age of 42 that had never hugged his dad. So I never felt there was a love connection. I almost felt at one point that when I was growing up, that my dad wasn't even my dad. It was like I never got to see him. He ran a business. He was in the warrior type where he was just working himself to death, and we used to get him to see him like a few hours at the weekend. And then I realized that he was almost hiding out the home because of his connection with his dad. So I then got to see in this circle, you pick people out as representatives, someone to be your dad, someone to be your mum, someone to be a symptom. And so I pull a symptom out, I pull mum, I pull dad. But you look in the circle, you've been with these people all day, and suddenly this person has the mannerisms or takes on the behaviors of your dad. They become like this conduit for that. And all their expressions there, it's like, oh my God, that's my dad. I've been with this dude all day, and now it's my dad. But it was the mum piece that actually was quite interesting, because my mum, being one of 8, her parents were really struggling at one stage. And they were going to give my mum away to her grandparents. 2 of my uncles ended up in care, and 2 of my aunties ended up in care, temporary. But what this meant is that my mum, her maternal love, because it was blamed on the mother then for her being what would have been abandoned and put onto her grandparents, she pushed all her love onto her dad. And then when I was born, I become the physical representation of my granddad, and almost labelled and given that kind of title of, you're just like my dad, you're just like my dad, you're just like your grandfather. And in the ceremony, you then got to see, so my mum was smothering me. My dad in the circle was pushed out. He was standing over there somewhere, and we were all like this close family. And someone said to the dad, who's the representative of my dad, how do you feel? And he said, I feel like I'm on a lonely island at times, but I'm okay. He was the man who was feeling lonely outside of the circle, the men. And what tends to happen is you can then heal it within the circle. So we're given certain things, instructions to say to heal the work. And then all of a sudden, dad could come closer. My representation of me is hugging dad. His dad is being hugged by him. And it healed it. And the way it heals it is so precise. There's such work in this, because my mum and my sister within this relationship never got on. They used to collide because, of course, all my mum's love was on me. My dad was being pushed out because all the love was on me. After that event, my mum and my sister became like best buddies, you know? I came away from the experience as this understanding of, I'm a 42-year-old man. If I want to hug my dad, all I have to do is ask for a fucking hug. You know? It's just an expression. Just go and give the man a hug. He doesn't know how to hug. That's what's happening. I have the power to heal that relationship. And in that, my son gets to see me hugging my dad. My son can see the template. And ultimately, the work that we're doing is about forming templates and forming appropriate behaviors for the next generations to observe, so they can see what it is to be man, what it is to be woman, what it is to be equal, I would say. So I find profundity in all the work. I find from the boxing to the social aspect of it to the spiritual aspect of it, I just think there's such depth in all the work we're doing, not just in the men's work, because ultimately it is about the next generations. You know, we may all have run, you know, our ancestors might have run the relay of a wobbly leg with the baton, handed it over, but it doesn't mean we have to go and run the same leg. It's our opportunity to pick up the skills of what it is to run that leg, to hand over the baton for them to run theirs. So that's where I feel it's at for me. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try and keep this brief because I know it's hard to sit and just listen to people talking. I find it hard anyway. So I want to share this story I'm going to try and tell you this story without crying, but it's a story about when I first met my wife. And I met her, and I know it sounds really cheesy, but I was like, I'm going to marry that woman. She's just so beautiful. And what would happen is that we'd have these moments where we'd be watching a movie or something like that, and it'd be really lovely and connected. And I would feel fear, and I'd want to escape. I could escape by looking at my phone, or taking a phone call, or going to the gym, or going to do some men's work stuff. It was like if there was a moment coming up where we were going to have a real sort of chilled, relaxed evening together, I would avoid it. And I was really lucky that, you know, my wife trained as a therapist, and my wife checked it out with me when we were together like a year. She was like, I've recognized that in these moments where we're really getting close to being connected and everything's really lovely, you want to leave. You're like itching to leave. And she was like, I'm just curious to why. And I was like, I don't know. And so I remember going and taking this to a circle, and a man said to me, growing up, did the people that loved you hurt you? And I went, my mum was an alcoholic. My dad left before I was 1. My uncle abused me. I was like, every person I loved hurt me. And here is a woman in front of me who I love, and I'm terrified she's going to hurt me. And how do I control not being hurt? I leave. I got this data. I was like, this is so sad, man. But what am I meant to do with this data? He was like, tell her. And I was like, you're joking. I was like, she's going to think I'm nuts. She's going to reject me. You want me to go to her and tell her this? And so I sat her down and I said, listen, you know, I'm terrified to tell you this, and I'm terrified you're going to think I'm nuts, and you're probably going to want to leave me. But in their moments of beautiful intimacy, I never had them growing up, and they were always followed with me being hurt or abused. And in their moments, I'm terrified you're going to hurt me. And so the way I try and control it is by me leaving. And she was like, I'm so happy to hear that, because I thought you just didn't love me anymore. And I was like, I love you so much. I'm willing to run away so you can't hurt me. Because if you hurt me, it would destroy me. And we hugged and we cried, and in that moment I experienced intimacy for the first time in my life. It's 27 years old. And yeah, we're happily married today. And we got beautiful daughters, and this is like yeah, thank you, man. Aquin. That's the work. It's like, it's not what we do sitting in the men's circle. It's like, can you take what you do in the men's circle and integrate it into your home? That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
So we've got 5 minutes left, and we're going to have to bring things to a close. But before we do, I would love to invite you, brothers, to just share perhaps like a sentence or two to perhaps the men in this space, or perhaps the women in this space that feel like men they know might benefit from this work. And I'd love you to perhaps just share an invitation. Why do they need this work? How can this work benefit them? If you have any final words.
I'll keep it really short as I know we have little time, but I think it's just to say that every relationship around you benefits from you doing the work. And that includes the relationship, of course, with yourself, you know? But every relationship truly does benefit from you doing the work, from us doing the work, every one of us. Not just the men, you know? That's where it's at. We're in a time now of doing the work, it would seem. So it's taking the responsibility on for that. And it matches up to the person behind the closed doors. You know, the reputations we have, forget that. It's one's character, you know. A reputation is just what others think about you, right? But the character is who you really are. And that's where the work is, to understand who you are. And then we can talk about leadership, and really, leadership is just leading oneself, you know? So leading yourself with authenticity, and I think, again, that brings it back to every relationship benefits from that, and that is true interdependence then. If we all rock up authentically, having done the work, imagine that world. Thank you.
Yeah, so think about what my daughter said. What did my daughter say? Why we asked her, why is it important for us to do the work? It's because it's important for children to feel like they're loved. If a child feels like they're unloved or unlovable, when they grow up, how might they feel at whole? How might they feel at whole? If you grow up and you feel unloved, addiction, right? That's where a lot of people go. Yeah? So that's just like a perfect example of, you know, why we have to do it. You heard it from my child's mouth, you know. And so, yeah, my invitation is to do your work, you know. I'm running a mixed workshop here today, and me and Zak are running a grief circle for men today. Like, there's an opportunity right now, today, to do some work. So really checking in with yourself. You know, is there something that you want to leave here? So when you go home, you got something to give to the people you love. Because it ain't really about us. It's about them, and like Tony said, the next generation. Aquin.
Right. Okay. I feel like it's to do with service. So, if you feel called into service, if you feel called to be here in support of this beautiful life, this beautiful planet, this beautiful family that we're cultivating, not just here at Medicine Festival, but in your own communities across the world, internationally, then join us at Convergence 8, outside of Edinburgh, September 14th to the 17th. And my final piece would be just the fact that the journey begins with one step, and that could just be connecting with a brother here, with a sister, calling a long-lost friend and just checking in and seeing how they're doing.
Spirit is a magical thing which has been weaving its way through this entire festival and experience. And I shared how one of the most potent, beautiful moments of my life was when me and my younger brother stared each other in the eyes and grieved the loss of our stepfather and really appreciated the mother that raised us. That is my mother, and that is my brother who have just arrived to this space. I love you so much. Thank you so much for keeping me alive in my hardest moments. And may we be reminded to not only love ourselves deeper, but love those around us deeper. So the invitation, men, is to connect with each other, connect with your heart, connect with your loved ones, find a circle, wherever that may be, across this country, across this world. And step by step, moment by moment, may we build a better world all together. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
One thing to leave you with, and to speak to the men. For me, every time I've stepped into the wound, every time I've turned around and looked at shadow, every time that I've walked fearlessly, but still fear flooding my body, and I've tenderly touched that wound, I've grown and I've expanded. And that can apply to men's work and women's work. So just leaving you with that courage to go forward and to face that part of yourself and to hold it with deep, unconditional love and heart, and watch the alchemization that will happen in that moment as it transforms from something that has plagued you like a hungry ghost or a beast to suddenly just melting away and no longer being that loud radio that's turned up in your head. So that first step, as Peter says, is so significant in that. So if you're a man, and the unmasked man will be bringing an unmasked woman in February, so woman as well. Step forward. I encourage you, whether it's with us, with any of these amazing men up here, to just do that first step. Lean into that edge. Whether that edge is confrontation, whether that edge is fear, whether that edge is loneliness, sadness, grief, anger, whatever it is. Take that first step. Thank you.
And just to reflect back to each and every one of you, thank you for being here and for just coming in, being open to what we had to share from our perspectives on all of this. But I just want to invite that each and every one of you has a valid perspective, and you're already on your path. You're already on your journeys. You're already beautiful. You're already doing the work. And just to remember that there can be this sense of like, oh, I need to get somewhere, or there's a kind of a goal in mind for like, oh, I just need to do the work and then I'll be perfect. Let's reverse that, okay? Let's bring ourselves back into that realization that each and every one of you is beautiful. Each and every one of you has so much to bring to your communities, has so much to bring to your families, has so much to bring to that connection to the deeper part of yourself already. So just to recognize that alongside, yes, there's always work to be done. There's always pathways for improving ourselves in the way that we relate and the way that we show up for what the world needs. Absolutely. And there's so many different flavors of that work. Menspedition, we had our first Wombspedition this year. We're even exploring the idea of a Queerspedition, maybe not that name, but the concept anyway, that we're expanding the way that we gather and the way that we support each other. But a big part of that is that we realize we're not here to do it all. We're not here to say that we need to be at the front leading all the time. Actually, it's an open space. So it's kind of like, come and bring the greatness that you're already carrying and just allow it to be seen and celebrated. And that is the way to really just, for us all to kind of rise collectively together, and the way for it to ripple through and out faster than it ever could if there was one, or even if it was just us trying to do it all. No, we need you as much as you may feel like we have something that you need. So we're all in this together, and I just honor you on your paths. Thank you so much. Thank you. I've ended up with 4 microphones. Say, right.
Thank you for keeping hold of all the mics there, Lawrence. We're really grateful. Lawrence, Alexander, Leyth, Peter, Michael, Tony, thank you for being here, for making space, for modeling what it means to be mature, embodied in your masculinity. You know, for being a great role model to men. You know, we need more brothers like you in the world. So thank you. Thank you, Ruby, Christabel, and
Thank
Advaya for
you.
hosting us.